had me when you started doing the cats. I was not expecting the cat part there. Welcome to Write.onair, everyone. This has been probably the last time we're going to use this intro. So
Thank God.
Thank God, says Natalie. Brandon likes it, I know.
No.
Dang it,
no,
Brandon.
you've been using this.
It's the best one ever.
You've been using the same song since the beginning.
It's a tradition at this point, Brandon. It's like an archaic tradition. But this was our outro.
Stress archaic.
Stress archaic, yes. This was our goodbye hymn to it.
That was the outro.
Yeah, I'll probably actually make that the new intro. I'll just isolate your voice.
No,
and
please,
just
God,
have
don't.
that the new.
Meow.
It'd be great. Anyways, welcome, Natalie. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Pretty good. Haven't had you in a while. We're here for some of your stuff.
Yes, indeed.
I'm actually super stoked for this because you told me about this story a long time ago. But
yeah.
before we get into it,
Yeah.
This is Write on Air, KZFR 90.1. We take writing from anyone who wants to submit and air it and appreciate it. If you want to be part of the show and help us have a show, because you guys make the show, you can do so submit-wise, at least, at write.onair@gmail.com. Brandon, your cue.
That is WRITE.onair@gmail.com.
Fantastic. Thanks, Brandon. All right, well, what is the name of this piece? And give us some background and context to it.
Oh, shoot. I changed the title on this a few times. Originally, this was called #I was a chubby Mexican. And it was submitted to AWP's writer-to-writer mentee application. And it was for a mentorship that I was going for. And I've been working on this for some time, kind of go in and out of working on it. And I really wanted to read it because I haven't really returned to it until like a day ago when I decided this was the piece that I was going to read on here.
Yeah.
I'm excited to read it because it did get pretty far into that mentorship program thing. And then I didn't end up getting the actual mentorship with the writer, but I got feedback from them, which was really cool.
Yeah, you mentioned that there were some pretty high up people that dug the piece.
Yeah, it was it was Sandra Cisneros who wrote House on Mango Street, and she taught at Chico State, which I didn't know until I'd gotten that word from her. So
Wow. Dropping names.
I am dropping names.
Very cool.
Like dollar bills, y'all.
So what's the tentative name now if you had to name it?
I guess it would still be #I was a chubby Mexican, even though that's not the central part of the story anymore, was the hashtag thing before.
That's why the name is changing.
Yeah, and the story is developing into something different, so.
Okay, well, cool. Well, you want to get into it?
I do, and I want to stress that I'm not a nonfiction writer. That's why I'm kind of struggling with titles and understanding where this is even going. So, and this is me encouraging other writers to break into new territory because you never know where it will take you.
But despite that, she is still a great writer. So this
Thank
is gonna
you.
be fun.
Yes, thank you. Okay. All right. #I was a chubby Mexican. My niece dug them out of a box and showed them to me last summer, unfazed by the dramatic difference between then and now. Look, Nana, she says, holding a stack of warp prints out to me. I take them into my hand, slipping through, slow first, then quick with the realization that these are some of the fat pics I thought I'd burned in a secret ritual years ago, the sight of which makes me start to rip myself from every frame, a vain attempt to erase my own history. She begins to cry, and at first I don't understand why they're important to her. My dad, you ruined these pictures of my dad, she screams. Her father recently left her family to pursue another woman, and now I've ripped apart pictures that had even the smallest appearance of him somewhere in them. An egoic act of self-preservation, which leaves a 9-year-old in tears. This whole moment is so very after-school special, and I feel like such an a-hole. Lily, I say, I want you to understand that I'm ashamed of this person. I'm pointing to me. When I say it, I mean it, yet I find I want to grab each word back from the air between us. Each early disclosure is the sad truth of what it means to be a woman today. Shame, humiliation, self-hatred, all brought to the surface by my own image, and I'm startled at how strongly these feelings still well up inside me. We sit together that afternoon, scotch taping fragments of my former self back into one complete photograph after another. Slowly now, I come back into the picture. Admitting fatness is difficult, even in these days of body positivity. I've what I call fit privilege to the outside world. I'm someone others have suggested couldn't know what it means or feels like to be overweight or ugly. I've denied being fat in my lifetime the way people deny slavery or the Holocaust. Yet here's the irrefutable proof. Her hair is greased, skin picked to scars from self-mutilation, large eyes lost in a sea of cheeks. But those who truly know me know I was once a glorious whale of a woman. Okay, maybe whale doesn't connote body positivity. Then again, it could be the very definition of it. Whales, cows, pigs, and other large mammalians are how society identifies people of imposing size. When I was fat, or rather morbidly obese, my life was about cracking self-deprecating jokes and wearing baggy men's clothing to cover the immense shame I felt at a total lack of self-control. When I wasn't making fun of myself, I was shoving food down my throat for fear of having nothing original to say. The hardest part has been providing the proof. Image is everything, and I'm seen as a very strong-willed individual. People can't comprehend what it's taken me to break barriers to the present. They only see what's in front of their nose. I can say it 1,000,000 times. I was once 266 pounds. But we are a very visual society. It was last Christmas as I stood in the long hallway of my parents' home, the place I spent most of my sentence to fatness, absorbing old photographs lining the hallways, that I finally faced my fear. Here she is, I said to a photo of myself. She is a fat, jank-toothed, self-cut, bobbed 17-year-old with two brows plucked so thin they barely exist. Jean Harlow, she ain't. I laugh aloud at the old black and white. Hashtag I was a chubby Mexican is how I tag it on Instagram, sharing only a minute amount with people I know nowadays, a tiny portion of this large part of who I am. Because I was fat, I am who I am today. Because I was fat and because I have been thin, and several other things in between, I have experienced this world from perspectives most will be glad to never know. I am acceptable now. I myself am more than acceptable. I'm going to dare to draw my toe along the line of exceptionalness, if that's even a word. Surface level stuff like a college degree, a sense of style, working at a cool job, and living in a nice home environment make me acceptable to myself. I became exceptional without realizing it because of a heightened state of invisibility. In a quest to thin out, I've also worked my way away from Social Security, permanent disability, and stabilized my epilepsy to the point I can drive again. After 10 years on, I came off 12 psych meds, which if you've ever been through something like it, it's akin to, or rather it's exactly the same as coming off serious drug addiction. I got myself off Section 8 housing and other debilitating social programs that imprisoned me for a decade of my life in the system in much the same way my fat suit did. I now serve and support my community as an active volunteer, all of which, while fulfilling, should be enough, never seems to be. I now freely cop to my frequency of invisibility, the kind which only comes with not owning your own story. Invisibility is a tactic I developed for social survival early on. It was the moment with my niece over the summer that brought the idea back to me. The moment in the hallway at Christmas where I face my own image that brings me around full circle. My knee-jerk reaction is to tear myself to pieces, literally and metaphorically. The more I have listened to the way I speak about myself, the more I begin to understand the kinds of shame I still carry heavy within. The only way to rid myself of it is to admit to this earliest trauma of being fat head-on. It's not about weight and wanting to look and feel my best. The real and long-lasting obesity people fight is never actually about weight itself at the end of the day, and a lot of people seem to not understand that. Thus, they continue to fight this ongoing battle with bulging. My story has been about the gravity and gradual acceptance that comes with learning how to not only survive but thrive in this world, how to let go of past hurt that physically weighed me down, and to realize that I am safe enough to lighten the load of the burden I carry. Fatness became something in this world I could change, something I could control in the otherwise uncontrollable, which is actually very empowering when you realize you have complete control over what you decide to carry with you, weight or otherwise. I'm 18, standing in the makeup aisle of Walgreens, surrounded by glossy stock photos of glamour girls, filling the shelves full of foundations, pads of rouge, and other foreign objects when I'm approached by a woman. "You're really, really brave to wear lime green considering your size," she says to me. Admittedly, it was a bold choice for anyone. You should have seen the color of that shirt, and to this day I can't explain what I was thinking. But this strange woman keeps pressing on and on about my figure and color schemes in general. "Wearing such a loud color only calls attention to you, honey." "Well, thanks, dear Abby, I didn't ask you." I have a laundry list of critiques for this tacky, classless woman, but I'm not cruel. I bite my tongue, enduring this much the way I've endured every other slight I get. Because it's such a daily thing, I've learned to normalize and even expect this kind of treatment. Silence is how I've learned to cope. These kinds of things weren't completely lost on me. I mean, I do suppose the end goal of them sometimes stuck. Insults sometimes spiraled me to a renewed commitment to my health and appearance. Pledges I'd sometimes succeed at, sometimes fail. Fad diets like Atkins, Weight Watchers, or starvation. Whatever sparked a glimmer of hope. 600 crunches a morning, that's how Janet Jackson got her six-pack. And rather than eat, I'd do 2 hours of cardio and smell the buttercream lotion on my hands as dessert, like the neurotic, weight-obsessed weirdo I was. The sad thing was, this actually worked. Self-denial had been the way of the Stoics, and hadn't it been said that big girls don't cry? And so I didn't cry anymore. I just stopped eating altogether. And this kind of yo-yoing took its toll on my body. For every diet I used to reclaim an increasingly shattered spirit, I'd eventually have to endure yet another procedure. Esophagams, gallbladder removal, GERD, all the things that you can go through. Years of obesity, narcissistic obsession, and nihilistic indifference caused serious damage physically and emotionally. I had a nervous breakdown at 24 while caregiving for my mother through her first spinal surgery, then triple-negative breast cancer. Instead of spiraling into commitment to myself, I went into a deep and severe depression. Misdiagnosed bipolar by a general practitioner, whose diagnostic criteria was based on a 10-question questionnaire, I was placed on 10 medication doses a day, eliminating satiety. I gained the weight I'd so feverishly jogged off, eating every meticulously counted calorie and then some. I slept somewhere between 12 to 17 hours a day and became increasingly suicidal. Within 6 months, I'd gone from 148 pounds to 266. My doctor fast-tracked me for a gastric bypass through a program then being pushed in Shasta County. Within a month of consultation, I was approved for a Roux-en-Y procedure due to my health history and the weight gain I'd experienced from medication. As I viewed my remaining scars, I feel they intrinsically tied to the emotional ones I carry. Stretch marks, bane of my existence. While not as visible as they once were, I see them like whip slashes that I might never forget who I truly am. Some days are better than others when I look at myself and consider how far I've come. Others, all I see is who I once was, a prisoner to my own flesh. Post-Roux-en-Y, I remained emotionally emaciated by unrealistic demands of both family and friends, when my body finally began to reflect it. I've lived the fat girl's supposed fantasy, going from a size 26 to a size 0, and I can attest to the empty nature which lie in being truly thinned out. As with most dreams, they didn't really play out as I'd imagined. Shock of shocks, the world treats you differently depending on what size you are. Your own family, best friends, and worst of all, you yourself will treat you different. You'll become more approachable, deserving, and acceptable when you're thinner. It's hard to deny the charm of the more manic version of me, which emerged from the lotus pod of flesh and medication. This Natalie was a wide-eyed, tiny, animated parody, the manic pixie dream girl of film lore. When you've been hiding in old man sweaters, Dickies, and Chucks for 2 decades, only the brightest colors and cutesy bowler hats will suffice to express this personality that's been hiding inside all those years. I joke that what was once a fatterpillar emerged a social butterfly. It didn't help that I was a 25-year-old virgin who'd never been kissed or even approached by an interested man until I came into my beauty. What does one do with the information that suddenly you're hot enough to get laid? The only form of lust I'd known to this point were unwanted advances from seedy weirdos. Confidence is no overnight affair. No one can be mentally prepared to be treated one way their whole life and then suddenly another. To have people be kind to you for no other reason than the fact that they like your face, Your but your outfit, your scent is primal. What else is primal is that a whole other group of people will dislike you for the very same reasons. I'm sitting at my workstation, the place where I find myself most these days, staring at pictures of myself from the days of size 0. I was 28 at the time. I'm 34 now. This girl with a daring crop pixie, wearing very matchy clothes in every photo, is foreign to me. Yet I know their pictures strategically hanged in a vain attempt to remind myself never to get too fat again. What is this actually accomplishing? I think to myself. That girl wasn't happy. She'd reached her goal weight. She wore all her fashionable clothes, hung out with the cool kids, and went to all the right places. Yet she never felt safe or visible. She may have been thin, but she hadn't escaped being who she was and who she truly is. Being thin only makes it easier to hide in this world. You should burn her pictures too. This is what I do. I talk to myself in third person like I'm Hamlet or something, with the things about me I don't want to own. I do it with hip-jutted skeletal me. I do it with depressed, Norbit-sized burger-packing me. The sad thing is these two girls are the exact same person and still very much a part of who I am. I can pretend all I want that I've transitioned from one way of being to another, yet both will always be inside me. I do myself a disservice in denying that I overcame the pressure of being too fat or too thin, that in the end it was even about weight at all. What is fat anyway besides something our body developed as a tool to survive and keep us safe? I consider now that I was trying to protect myself from, and why I thought it necessary to carry so much with me, physically and emotionally. When I was ready to let it go, I did. Then something else would happen, and I'd need to hang on again. Body baggage, basically. Maybe it's okay now to accept that I'm insecure, and that feeling insecure doesn't necessarily mean I'm not safe. And if I'm only insecure, but still safe, then I don't have to seek shelter in things like food. Feeling insecure means I'm human, and I'm allowed to be, especially after all I've lived through. I don't need to fill myself up with things that hurt me to make me feel seen. I need to do things that make me feel proud so I can feel more secure in who I am. Popping gum in my mouth, I scan photos along my wall, feeling as though I've been so many different selves in one lifetime. I think about the versions of me, and if they were standing next to me right now, knowing all the times I've denied their existence, how it would have hurt them more than any person who called them some large mammal name or a slut, more than any person who'd made them feel less than. Like their presence in my timeline of my life, or Instagram for that matter, hadn't had its place. They're important people too. I hold two photos up. One I'm very thin, the other very fat. Both I'm making the same face, which I make back at the group of us. She's a good person, and she's a good person. I'm a good person. I've got to stop listening to people who try to tell me otherwise. I've got to stop trying to actually carry the weight of the world. I don't think any version of me deserved a lot of what I got. I don't think anyone in this world would, and trust me when I say details omitted from this story say more about me and how much I've grown over the last couple of years than what I've chosen to share. I will cop to this, though. I was a chubby Mexican. I'm glad this isn't the entirety of my being. I'm glad I'm not the sum of my fat, and I'm glad that I was ever overweight, because now I have the superpower of seeing people beyond their appearances and into what they are at their core. I hold the photos in their entirety side by side to inspect them, without the need to tear the girls apart, literally or otherwise, letting them hold their place in my history.
Whew. I feel like there needs to be applause for that.
Okay.
That was amazing. The best way I can describe like listening to you read this was like having a friend come up to you and say, hey, I want to chat, and then just going out to a park and sitting on a bench and then realizing that you knew them not at all, which is beautiful. To me, I'm not even sure how I can describe that emotion other than that kind of picture right there. This was, from the standpoint of just a writing perspective, phenomenal. It was absolutely amazing. If I had to take that stance, like it was, you opened up with such an immense story to tell, I think, about yourself, and you approached it wonderfully. It was like walking along your own past with you, and you pointed out certain things. And there's this beautiful, the ending wanted to make me cry because it was absolutely beautiful. The acceptance of all of you at any point in time, and the powers and stuff you've gained from that. That is just, Natalie, this is an amazing piece.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Brennan?
I love this piece. I do a lot of reading. I've done that before this show and more because of this show. And one thing I will say with nonfiction is that good nonfiction reads like a story. And this sounds exactly like Kevin said, like you sitting down with someone and telling them a story about your past. And it's obviously not a very comfortable story for you, but I think it's a story that as you've written, this has helped you maybe get a little bit more confidence with yourself and put yourself together. We've all had, if anyone looks at their past, they will find that they have been different people throughout their past. Not just body image, but just different people. Back in high school, back in middle school, back in elementary school, you acted differently. You hung out with different people. You were into different things. And this is a really visual thing, but I can bet that the emotional side of those people was a lot different and maybe more to an extreme than their physical characteristics. And I think this story kind of brings that to bear, and it's wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, I have to thank my friend Luke who helped me edit this. He sat down with me and went through it and told me to ground it in scenes. So I was trying to think of a few things without getting really too personal. And I did actually cut some things out that I didn't want to read on air from this because I was like, I don't know who's going to hear this also. But yeah, it is really hard to tell this. And there was a part in there that I put about things that I omitted because there's a lot to this story, including reasons why I needed to eat like I did, why I needed to hide, why I still feel the need to be invisible now, and why I still feel the way that I do and still feel very tied to this person that I was, and will always kind of struggle with these emotions that I have about having been overweight during this most formative time of my life. Like, I missed out on a lot of things because of how I grew up and who I was when I was younger, that it's completely changed me as a person. But the great thing about writing and how healing it can be is that you can rewrite your own story to tell it a different way and to make it empowering. So for me and for anyone out there who's struggling with something from their past, like, this is something that, like, the reason I was overweight or fat or whatever you want to call it, that you know, whatever words you need to use for it, it's tied to a lot of other things in my life. But for me, I know that it makes me who I am today, a more empathetic and a better person. So I don't regret it. And so through writing, it made it better for me to go through and rewrite it and even tell it to myself in such a way that I started listening to the way that I talk about myself aloud and think. Like, it's actually made it better the way that I treat myself. And I did gain actual confidence from this too. And that's why I'm like, this keeps changing. This actual story from my life has changed me as a person, and I think it will always continue evolving too, the way that I tell it.
Yeah, listening to you read this is kind of akin to watching a mantra. What you keep telling yourself to keep going, to take the next step, because this entire piece is a process. This doesn't have an ending, like you said. It's still ongoing, and I think that's the most beautiful part of this is that you dialogued all of what you've done to show the practices that you have now in place for your life, and that is fantastic. The ending that you touch on, which is like, well, it's not a separation, because most of this story you separate yourself in different spots and you completely push them aside. Mm-hmm. And the ending where you kind of come back together really hit me in a very deep way, because I think that is probably the healthiest way to approach those things, and honestly the hardest thing to do for all that stuff, which we don't have much time to talk about it. I want to do more on this, and we're going to have a part 2 of this, so stay tuned for Natalie. But I want to point out one spot that really struck me hard, if that's all right.
Yeah, there was something else you mentioned though about not knowing, like sitting down with someone and realizing you didn't know them. That was the huge reason why I wrote this piece, was because there's not a lot of people that I've shared photos of myself with, and that was a huge part of it, was that not a lot of people know. And when I share with them that I was really dramatically overweight for a portion of my life, and then I'll share photos with them, they're like, it's like you're a completely different person. And I'm like, yeah, I was, but I also wasn't. Is very very much the same inside, but nobody knew.
My time knowing you has been quite remarkable, because I think from day one you were on this journey, and I was kind of like, I came into your life at a point when you were walking it, and I always was, I knew there was a lot more, because we had talked in private and stuff and been like, oh, these things happen or these things happen, and I was always like, wow, she's such a fascinating person, but I never knew all this about you.
Yeah.
And it's
there's more.
Yeah, there's always more. I guess I shouldn't be too surprised.
There's a lot to Kevin too. You all don't know, and Brandon.
To everyone. We'll all write our own pieces.
That's why I hang out with them.
Well, we're going to have a part 2, so I'm not too worried about not hitting a lot of these things that I want to touch in here. And we only have a few minutes left, and I kind of want to leave you with the floor, Natalie. So as far as this goes, what was the time spent working on this piece? Because this obviously took a long time. You had some iterations and some editing processes and stuff.
I would say this has been ongoing for about a year, but I actually ran into Joe Murphy earlier today when we were talking about writing. I work on it. I was telling him too. I don't know. I come back and forth to it. It's been about a year in the process, but it's taken so many different forms. Like, it started out as 4 pages in length, and then it's up to 7 now. It was at 10. But the process has been just taking pieces out, putting things back in. I'll work on it for a few weeks at a time, and then I hadn't actually touched it until today. It'd been about 6 months since I even looked at it, and I forgot it was even there. I hadn't even thought about it since, I think it was October, right when I had my surgery, that I got the news from them that hey, you're in consideration again for this mentorship thing. And I'm like, whoa. And that was the last time that I looked at it. And then I looked at it today, and I was like, wow, I should read this, because it was something that had some promise in it. And I think, again, I'll spend a little time on it, and then I won't touch it again for a while. But I feel like this is a promising piece. And I want to urge other writers out there to return to things that they hadn't looked at or gave up on, because you have a fresh set of eyes every day that you wake up. It's a fresh set of eyes. So,
and any, I guess, last words of encouragement for people writing something from a very deep, deep personal spot?
Oh yeah, and that was the other thing I said to Joe, is because he writes fiction and I write nonfiction, and I don't usually normally write nonfiction, is that I tend to get really bound up when I write. I mean, I physically twitch, and my muscles spasm and stuff. I just want to say that you need to have some good self-care and take care of yourself, especially with nonfiction, that you can trigger yourself pretty hard, and just be careful and take breaks. And, but it really can change your life and transform you as a person to deal with these things. And, I want to encourage you to really work through your things, even if it's just journaling, to do it.
And you'll end up as beautiful a soul as Natalie.
You do go on.
We only have a minute, though. So.
Okay.
Man, thanks for being on the show, Natalie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And Joe inspired me to continue working on my writing for a bit. So that's why I'm taking a bit of a hiatus from the show as a co-host.
She'll be back. We have to have her. She's so good for the show.
Thank you.
Well, anything last words and last few seconds for you, Brennan?
I just love having Natalie here. She always brings good pieces. She's always a really lively person to have on the mic. And I hope you all have enjoyed this, and you've all been inspired to be you. Be better people. Be the best you, not the best you that people want.
Yeah, Brandon.
That's the best thing I can think
Brandon's the best.
of. Have a good night, everyone.